You ever walk away from a conversation feeling drained, confused, or even guilty, but you're not sure why? Maybe you said no, but somehow they made you feel like the bad guy. Maybe you started with clarity and left in a fog. That's not miscommunication. That's psychological manipulation. And chances are, you've been living in it longer than you realize. Because manipulators don't need weapons. They use words. They use silence. They use your empathy like a key to unlock your defenses. They smile as they trap you. They apologize as they disarm you. They listen, only to use what you say against you later. And the most disturbing part, they know exactly what they're doing. This video is not about fear. It's about clarity. You're about to step inside the mind of a manipulator, not to become like them, but to finally see them, to understand the power game they play, and how to stop losing. Because when you understand how they think, you stop being a target. We'll break down the red flags no one taught you to see. We'll uncover the invisible tactics they use, from gaslighting to guilt tripping, from charm to emotional blackmail. You'll learn why they pick you, why your kindness, your openness, your compassion becomes their perfect entry point. But more than that, you'll learn how to take your power back. This isn't just theory. We'll ground it in real psychology, like Carl Rogers' concept of incongruence, where a manipulator presents a false self to mask their real intentions. And we'll explore how modern behavioral science reveals the subtle ways emotional predators distort your reality before you even notice. We'll walk through real-life moments you've probably lived. The boss who compliments you before cornering you with impossible deadlines. The partner who shifts blame with tears and twisted timelines. The friend who always needs help, but disappears when it's your turn to lean. This isn't drama, it's a pattern. And the sooner you recognize it, the sooner you stop being a pawn in someone else's game. If you've ever questioned your own memory, your own gut, your own worth, this video is for you. And if you've ever whispered to yourself, maybe I'm just too sensitive, let me be clear, you're not. You've just been surrounded by people who benefit from your confusion, but not anymore. The manipulation ends when awareness begins. So let's begin. They don't start with control. They start with comfort. A manipulator's first move isn't domination. It's disarming. They want you to feel safe, seen, special. And they know exactly how to mirror the version of themselves that you'll let your guard down for. It's not by accident. It's by design. They study what makes you tick. Your values, your insecurities, your needs. They listen, not to understand you, but to map you. They'll echo your beliefs, validate your pain, highlight your dreams. Why? Because trust is the most powerful access code to the human mind. And if they can earn your trust, they can rewrite your perception. This isn't fiction. It's how emotional predators operate in real life. Dr. George Simon, a clinical psychologist and author of In Sheep's Clothing, calls this the charm offensive. It's a strategy where manipulators deliberately suppress their true intentions, hiding behind a carefully constructed version of themselves. The false self Carl Rogers described as incongruent with their real motives. Think about it. The coworker who always praises you in public, but subtly takes credit behind the scenes. The romantic partner who showers you with affection until you set a boundary. The friend who just wants to help, but makes every decision for you. These aren't just social quirks, they're masks. And masks are not worn without purpose. They're worn to buy time, to get close enough to steer your thoughts from the inside out. Because once you believe they're on your side, you stop questioning them. You stop listening to your gut. You second-guess your instincts, and that's the moment they win. They don't need to yell. They don't need to threaten. They just need you to doubt yourself slightly more than you trust yourself. And once they've done that, they can gaslight, guilt trip, and dominate without resistance. This is why so many people stay in toxic dynamics longer than they should. It's not stupidity. It's not weakness. It's attachment to a mask that once felt like love, loyalty, or friendship. And that's what makes it so painful to walk away. You're not just leaving a person. You're leaving the illusion they created, the version of them you wanted to believe in. But here's the truth. If someone's love only exists when you agree, if their support fades when you speak up, if their kindness disappears when you need accountability, that was never real. It was a performance, a calculated trust-building exercise. And your first step in protecting yourself is this: stop trusting the surface. Start listening to the shift beneath it. When words and actions don't align, believe the action, because the mask might be beautiful, but what lies behind it is not. Imagine this. You remember what was said. You remember how it made you feel, but somehow, you're the one apologizing. That's not confusion. That's gaslighting. It's one of the most sinister tactics in the manipulator's arsenal, not because it screams, but because it whispers. It doesn't confront your truth. It corrodes it. Silently, slowly, relentlessly. Gaslighting is psychological warfare dressed as concern. It sounds like, "Why are you so sensitive? You're remembering it wrong. I was just joking. Can't you take a joke?" At first, it feels like a misunderstanding. Then it feels like a pattern. Eventually, it becomes a prison, built from the erosion of your own certainty. You begin to question your memory, then your judgment, then your sanity. And that's exactly the point. Because when a manipulator can make you doubt your own perception of reality, they gain a terrifying kind of power. They become the narrator of your life. What you saw? Misinterpreted. What you felt? Too dramatic. What you needed? Unreasonable. This is not an accident, this is the loop. Every time you raise a concern, they dismiss it. Every time you draw a boundary, they mock it. Every time you try to name what's happening, they flip it on you. And you begin to internalize the narrative. Maybe it is me. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I should just keep quiet. But here's the reality. Gaslighting works best on emotionally intelligent, compassionate people. People who pause to consider other perspectives. People who self-reflect. People who don't want to hurt others. In other words, people like you. And that's what makes it so devastating, because your strengths become your vulnerabilities. Your empathy becomes your cage. Let's ground this in real psychology. Dr. Robin Stern, author of The Gaslight Effect, explains that gaslighting thrives in what she calls the gaslight tango, a dynamic where one person needs control and the other needs approval. And once this cycle begins, it reinforces itself. You don't just fall for the manipulation, you begin to need the manipulator's reassurance to feel stable again. It's psychological addiction. The more distorted your reality becomes, the more you rely on them to interpret it for you. This shows up in everyday American life in ways most people miss. A parent repeatedly tells their adult child that events didn't happen that way, even when there's proof. A partner insists, "You're always angry," after doing something deeply disrespectful. A manager denies ever giving a contradictory instruction, gaslighting you in front of your team, and every time it happens, your inner compass spins harder. So how do you break the loop? You stop negotiating with your reality. You write things down. You trust what you saw. You believe how you felt. Because truth doesn't need permission. If someone consistently denies your experience, mocks your emotions, or twists your words, that's not miscommunication. That's erasure. And you don't owe your peace of mind to anyone who profits from your disorientation. Step out of the loop. Step back into yourself. You weren't targeted because you're weak. You were targeted because you care. One of the greatest lies about manipulation is that it only happens to people who are gullible or insecure. But that's not how it works. Manipulators don't hunt the weak. They hunt the emotionally rich. Because empathy is a gift, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a handle. When you're empathetic, you seek understanding before judgment. You give second chances. You imagine how others feel, even when they've hurt you. And you believe people can change. Because you would. That's beautiful. But for manipulators, it's gold. Because now, they don't need to hide. They just need to look wounded. A manipulator's favorite disguise is vulnerability. They'll tell you they've been hurt before. They'll confess they're bad at relationships. They'll share a traumatic past, not always because it's true, but because it builds the narrative immunity they need. Now, when they lie, it's because they're scared. When they lash out, they're triggered. When they cheat, they're self-sabotaging. And guess what? You forgive. Not once, not twice. You rationalize the abuse because it comes wrapped in pain you don't want to invalidate. But here's the hard truth. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. Let's bring in Carl Rogers again, one of the most respected psychologists of the 20th century. He believed in unconditional positive regard, but he also warned of incongruence. When someone's external behavior contradicts their internal truth, manipulators exploit this space. They show you a broken surface so you won't look underneath. They mirror just enough vulnerability to stay close, but never enough to grow. You see their wounds and feel called to heal. But what you don't realize is, your empathy becomes emotional debt they can collect at will. This happens every day in relationships across the US. A partner opens up about a tragic childhood and uses it to excuse controlling behavior. A friend constantly shares their drama, but never supports you when you're down. A family member weaponizes their past to silence your boundaries. And every time you hesitate, because you're not just dealing with manipulation, you're dealing with guilt. You think, if I walk away now, I'm abandoning them. If I speak up, I'll hurt them more. If I set limits, I'm being cold. But ask yourself, when did protecting them mean erasing you? Empathy is powerful, but it's not a license to be emotionally looted. Being understanding doesn't mean being blind. Being kind doesn't mean being used. And being compassionate doesn't mean being controlled. So the next time someone uses their pain to override your peace, remember this. Their story matters, but so does yours. And the people who deserve your empathy won't demand it at the cost of your identity. Not all control looks harsh. Sometimes it sounds like, I'm just worried about you, or I only want what's best. And at first, you believe it, because it feels like love. It looks like care. But soon, something shifts. You start asking for permission instead of sharing decisions. You start hiding parts of your life to avoid reactions. You start feeling guilty for doing things that once made you feel free. That's not care. That's camouflaged control. Manipulators rarely show up with rage on day one. They show up with protection, concern, even support. They don't say, do as I say. They say, I'm just trying to help. And in American culture, where self-sacrifice is often praised and emotional dependence romanticized, this dynamic slips under the radar. But look closer. Is their concern conditional? Does their support disappear when you disagree? Do they only listen when you follow their lead? Because here's the truth. Control doesn't always come with a leash. Sometimes it comes with a hug. Let's break this down with real-life examples. Your partner asks for your location constantly, saying it's for your safety. Your friend criticizes your other relationships, insisting they're just being honest. Your parent questions every life decision you make and calls it guidance. Each time, it feels like they care. But with time, it becomes clear. Their care has strings. This is what psychologists call covert control, the hidden ways someone uses emotional leverage to limit your autonomy without ever seeming aggressive. Dr. Harriet Lerner, author of The Dance of Anger, notes that emotional manipulators often reframe their control as love. But true love is not about reshaping someone into who you want them to be. It's about supporting who they are becoming, even when that path diverges from yours. Manipulators can't tolerate that divergence, because your independence threatens their influence. Your clarity disrupts their confusion. Your growth exposes their stagnation. So they tighten the reins, not with threats, but with guilt. Not with demands, but with subtle corrections. Are you sure you want to do that? I just think you're making a mistake. You've changed. That last one cuts the deepest, because it's designed to hurt, to make you question whether your evolution is actually betrayal. But ask yourself, why does my growth make them uncomfortable? Why does my peace trigger their concern? Why does my autonomy feel like rebellion? Because it is, to them. To someone who equates love with control, your boundaries will always feel like abandonment. But don't confuse the two. You're not leaving them. You're returning to yourself. So the next time someone disguises control as care, remember, real care expands you. It doesn't cage you. And the people who truly want what's best for you won't need to hold the leash to keep you close. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one day questioning your worth, your instincts, your truth. It begins quietly, with the smallest hesitation, with a glance that makes you second guess, with a comment that lingers longer than it should, and slowly, piece by piece, your self-trust dissolves. This is the most dangerous effect of psychological manipulation. Not the arguments, not the gaslighting, not the lies, but the moment you no longer trust yourself more than them. Because once that happens, they don't need to control you anymore. You'll do it for them. You'll silence your own voice. You'll override your gut. You'll hand over the steering wheel of your life, thinking you're being reasonable, mature, or loving. That's the trap. Self-doubt becomes your default. Not because it's natural, but because it's been engineered. Let's make this real. You share something personal and they say, "Are you sure that's how it happened?" You make a decision, and they reply, "I don't think that's the smartest move." You express how you feel, and they respond. You always make things a bigger deal than they are. These moments don't scream abuse, but they plant seeds that grow into inner silence. You begin to fear your own judgment. You overthink every choice. You start needing their validation before you can move. And here's the cruel irony. The more you rely on them, the more proof they have that you're unstable without them. That's not love. That's psychic dependency. In clinical terms, what's happening is a collapse of internal locus of control, a concept in psychology that refers to your belief in your ability to influence your life. Manipulators work over time to shift that locus outward. Now, they hold the answers. They define your truth. They tell you who you are. And the damage runs deep. Because when you can't trust yourself, you'll accept anything, even pain, as long as it feels familiar. Many Americans live in this cycle every day. A woman hesitates to leave a toxic partner because no one else would put up with me. A man stays in a job where he's consistently belittled because maybe I'm just not good enough. A young adult distances from friends and hobbies because I don't know who I am anymore. This isn't low self-esteem. It's psychological erosion, caused. And here's the hardest part. You won't always notice when it's happening, because manipulation doesn't need to scream to be effective. Sometimes all it needs is repetition. So how do you rebuild? You start by interrupting the script. When you feel doubt, ask, "Is this my voice, or one I absorbed?" When you hesitate, ask, "Who taught me that my instincts weren't reliable?" Because the truth is, self-trust isn't something you lost. It's something that was taken, bit by bit, word by word, but it can be reclaimed. And the moment you begin listening to yourself again, really listening, is the moment the manipulator's power dissolves. Because in the end, the strongest protection against control is knowing that your voice was never wrong. It was just silenced. We've been taught to ignore red flags, to explain them away, to call them just stress, or a bad day, or nobody's perfect. But what if those uncomfortable feelings weren't signs of your judgmental nature? What if they were rescue signals from your nervous system? Because here's the truth. Your body notices before your mind understands. That tightening in your chest, that strange sense of guilt after a conversation, that exhaustion that follows time with someone who supposedly cares. Those are not mood swings. They're warnings, and they matter. Red flags aren't dramatic. They're data. But manipulators have conditioned you to dismiss the data and doubt the dashboard. They'll say, "You're reading too much into it. You're always looking for problems. You just don't understand me." And so, instead of trusting your signals, you rewrite them. "It's probably nothing. I don't want to seem dramatic. Maybe I'm just tired." But this is how people stay in damaging relationships for years. Not because they didn't see the red flags, but because they were convinced it was impolite to act on them. Especially in a culture like the US, where politeness is currency and confrontation is treated like aggression. But let's be clear, acknowledging red flags is not cruelty. It's clarity. Think of the early signs. They interrupt you mid-sentence, but laugh it off as playful. They avoid taking responsibility, but call themselves misunderstood. They rush emotional intimacy, saying, "I've never felt this way before," too soon. Each of these moments seems small, but they reveal something bigger. The relationship is not about connection, it's about control. You're not being paranoid, you're being warned. According to therapist and researcher Dr. Ramani, one of the leading voices in narcissistic abuse recovery, red flags are not only real, but consistent. Her work emphasizes that manipulative people often use idealization and devaluation in cycles, which makes it harder to leave. The good moments become camouflage. But red flags aren't erased by good moments. They coexist, and the presence of one doesn't cancel the other. Manipulators love ambiguity. They weaponize your hope. They bank on your potential for forgiveness. But red flags are not puzzles to solve. They are boundaries being crossed, in slow motion. So let's flip the narrative. Walking away early is not failure. It's wisdom. Saying "that didn't sit right with me" is not drama. It's discernment. Asking for space is not punishment. It's self-preservation. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they act like they want to be in it. And you definitely don't owe them the benefit of the doubt when your body is screaming for air. Your nervous system isn't a liar. It remembers what your mind tries to unsee. So the next time something feels off, Don't call yourself crazy. Call yourself awake, because red flags don't make you rude. They make you ready. Leaving isn't always the hardest part. Not feeling guilty after leaving. That's the real battle. Because when you finally see the pattern, when the fog lifts and the manipulation becomes clear, you don't just walk away from a person. You walk away from a story you were sold, and one you helped write, and manipulators know that. That's why they don't just entangle you emotionally. They entangle your identity. They say, no one else gets you like I do. You're just afraid of real connection. You're giving up on something meaningful. And if you're not careful, you start to believe them. You confuse detachment with betrayal. You confuse distance with failure. You confuse peace with coldness. But detaching isn't cruelty. It's clarity. You are not abandoning them. You are returning to yourself. Psychologist Dr. Leslie Becker Phelps, known for her work on attachment and emotional healing, explains that we often internalize toxic bonds as proof of our worth. We stay because leaving forces us to confront the question, if I mattered to them so little, what does that say about me? But here's a better question. Why should your value be proven through pain? Detaching means refusing to play the game, even when they rewrite the rules mid-match. It means letting go, even when they say, but we had good times. Yes, and those good times were often the bait. It means remembering that inconsistency is not affection, that love does not live in fear, that control is not connection, and if the only way to feel safe is to shrink, that's not a bond, it's a spell. So how do you break it? Step 1. Expect the guilt. It will come, but guilt is not a stop sign. It's a scar from carrying responsibility that was never yours. Step 2. Name the truth, out loud. What happened? What hurt? What crossed the line? Because silence protects the manipulator, but language liberates you. Step 3. Cut clean. No long explanations. No final closure conversations. Manipulators use closure to reopen control. You don't need their understanding to be free. Step 4. Mourn what was promised, not just what happened. Let go of the potential, the what if, the version of them that existed only in moments. Because grieving the illusion is part of healing the truth. In everyday life, this looks like unfollowing that friend who always made you feel small, even if they never meant it that way. Saying no to that ex who only reaches out when you're finally happy. Refusing to answer that late-night message that tugs at your nostalgia but poisons your peace. These are not petty acts. They are spiritual hygiene. And yes, you'll miss them, or the version of them you were once addicted to. But you'll miss your freedom more if you stay. So when the guilt hits, say this: I don't need to explain myself to people who never saw me clearly. I don't need to justify peace to those who only loved me when I was in pieces. I'm not being cold. I'm being whole. Surviving manipulation is one thing. Reclaiming yourself afterward, that's the deeper work. Because even after they're gone, the echo of their voice can linger in your choices. Their rules can live on in your habits. Their doubts can disguise themselves as your own inner critic. That's how control survives. Not through presence, but through residue. So how do you clean it out? How do you take back the parts of your mind they colonized? You begin by doing something radical. You believe yourself again. You believe your memories, even if they don't come with validation. You believe your gut, even if it shakes. You believe your boundaries, even if they're new and wobbly. Because what manipulation steals is not just time. It steals trust in your perception. And recovery begins the moment you draw a line and don't explain it away. Boundaries aren't just healthy. They're life-saving recalibrations. They're not about pushing people out. They're about calling yourself back in. And here's the truth many never say aloud. You don't need to feel strong to set boundaries. You just need to honor your truth louder than their expectations. Let's make this real. In day-to-day American life, reclaiming your mind might look like not replying immediately to texts from people who once demanded instant access to your attention, canceling plans when you feel drained, without guilt, saying, I'm not available for that, when someone tries to drag you into their chaos, choosing silence instead of defending every decision to someone who never listened anyway. These may seem small, but each act is a retraining of your nervous system. Each time you listen to yourself, without shame, without apology, you're rewriting the code they once implanted. And here's something powerful. Carl Rogers believed that personal transformation happens not when people are told what to do, but when they finally feel safe enough to be real. Your boundaries are that safety. For your inner child, for your present self, for the future version of you that never again will confuse attention with affection, chaos with love, or silence with peace. Recovery isn't about perfection. It's about progression. Some days you'll grieve. Some days you'll rage. Some days you'll still hear their voice inside your head. But with time, your own voice grows louder, clearer, stronger. And one day you'll wake up and realize you don't flinch anymore. You don't explain anymore. You don't lower yourself to be understood. You simply exist, whole, sovereign, unshaken. And when someone tries to test the old patterns, you won't collapse. You'll smile softly and say, "That version of me doesn't live here anymore." Because now you see the game. You know the signs. And most importantly, you remember who you are without their shadow. Now you see it. The words behind the charm. The control behind the kindness. The pattern behind the confusion. What once felt like love now reads like a script. What once pulled you in now pushes you awake. What once drained you in silence now speaks loudly with clarity. This isn't just a lesson. It's a return to your mind, to your boundaries, to your truth. You don't need to go back and fix the past. You don't need to convince them you were right. You don't need their permission to move forward, because clarity isn't something they give you. It's something you reclaim. They wanted you confused. They wanted you dependent. They wanted you small enough to stay manageable. But look at you now. You see the game. You've named the mask, and you've stepped out of the spell. Now it's time to do something rare in a world of silent suffering. Protect your peace without guilt. Guard your empathy with discernment, and walk away. Not because you're cold, but because you're awake. This wasn't just about spotting a manipulator. This was about meeting yourself again, the version of you before they rewrote your instincts, the one who knew, the one who felt, the one who saw, and stayed silent, until now. And if this video made you feel seen, if something deep inside whispered finally, then you're not alone. Thousands are waking up to these patterns right now. You are not crazy, you are not too much, you are not dramatic, you are just done playing a role in someone else's power game. So take this clarity and do something with it. Set one boundary today, even if it's quiet, even if it's internal. Cut one tie that's been costing you your peace. Share this video with someone who's still trying to name what they're feeling, someone who's caught in the confusion, waiting for permission to leave. And if you're ready to go deeper, to understand not just them but yourself, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't do surface healing. We go where it hurts. We speak what was silenced, and we build a mind that no one can hijack again. Drop a comment below. What's one red flag you ignored that now feels obvious? Let's name them, so others can recognize them sooner. You've seen behind the curtain. Now choose what you'll tolerate. Choose what you'll protect. Choose what you'll become, now that your mind is yours again. This is your line in the sand, and the rest of your life will be built on the other side of it.